Hello. I feel like this school year I have done a good job of coping. This school year was my first year as a teacher, and I knew it was going to be challenging. When the pandemic hit last year, I was finishing up a maternity leave in a second grade classroom, and the superintendent offered to continue paying me if I would provide remote instruction to students. So I did have a little bit of experience and I knew a little bit of what to expect going into this school year, but it has really taught me to be more adaptive and flexible. I have been quite lucky though, however, my district has been in person for all of the school year with the exception of the first 2 weeks. For the first 2 weeks of school, we had to be virtual due to there being a high amount of COVID cases at a college within our county. And when we were all virtual, my students, not all of them had access to internet. And this is because my district is so remote, it's so rural, that the internet providers do not even give them an option of giving internet. The internet hasn't reached there yet. So I had students who couldn't participate in our Zoom classes, and those students were just given packets to complete during that 2 week time. And that raises a big concern because those students with no internet, how were they supposed to participate in school for one? And so then our only option was really giving them packets. The packets that we gave them, those aren't equitable to receiving instruction from a teacher. And those students who had to have packets for the first couple of weeks of school, they missed out on a lot, and they did not, receive a quality education during that time. So one thinking point from that is, how do students with no access to internet, how do they receive schooling? So it's important to think of that, because those students are at a disadvantage, and that's an issue that needs to be raised, and that's something we all need to consider moving into next school year. When we got back to be in person, however, my school did allow students to remain virtual, which meant that I was then responsible for in-person students and students on Zoom. Luckily for me, however, I only had one student who stayed on Zoom, and the rest of my students, I only had 12 students total, so 11 students were in person. And the part about this remote instruction that was really, really hard for me was that during cold and flu season, some of my students ended up getting sick. And when they were sick, they were encouraged to join our Zoom meetings until that they got the results of their COVID test, because they couldn't come back to school until they were tested. So sometimes I would get emails at 7:45 a.m. when we start at 8 a.m. and those emails would be from parents stating that their student was sick and was going to be on Zoom until they got their test results. And it was very, very challenging at the time, because as a first-year teacher, as a new teacher, I don't want to tell them no. I don't want to have that, that bad look, right? That, oh, she wouldn't let my kids join the Zoom class. So I always let them join. And it really taught me to be flexible and to, expect the unexpected. There was really no point in being upset over that, because I couldn't change that. It wasn't the student's fault. It wasn't anybody's fault. It's just something I had to do. Another thing I noticed is that my virtual student, who was virtual for the majority of the school year, did not make the same growth as my students who were in person. And I'm a general education teacher, and this student was a general education student, and I could not imagine trying to teach a special education student virtually. I don't think that remote learning provides any student, whether they're general education or special education, with quality educations. So it shouldn't be an option, in my opinion. If possible, if COVID protocols and everything allow for all students to return in person, I think that is the best option. So next year, I plan to keep the same positive attitude. There's things that we can control, there's things that we can't control, and this is just one of those things that we can't control. So there's no use in getting mad about it. Being flexible, keeping positive, and really just remembering why we got into teaching and why we chose this career is really important to, stay in the right mindset, and to not lose sight of that is important, because once you lose sight of why you're doing what you're doing, it really gets hard. So in my opinion, the best thing that we can do is just all stay positive, remember why we're teachers, and just keep on moving forward.